Hey everybody, how are you? Welcome back to art class. Today we're going to talk about something that will help you make your pictures look a little bit more realistic. It has to do with thinking about drawing things the way that we would see them in the real world. The word that we're going to talk about, the thing that we're going to talk about to help you is something called depth. So the word depth means how deep something is. Like when you go to the pool in the summertime and you look down and it says depth 3 feet, that means that from the top of the water down to where the floor, the bottom of the pool is, there's 3 feet of water there. It's 3 feet deep. In our artwork, depth has kind of a similar meaning, but it's not necessarily like how deep something is. It's more about how far we can see into a piece of artwork. When we're looking out into the real world and when we're looking into artwork, there's kind of three areas, 3 distances. If we look at this example for a second, this is just a normal landscape, but we're going to use it to talk about those 3 distances. If we look way far off into the distance, that's called the background. So in this one, that's like our sky, that's our mountains. Way back there is the background. Everything kind of close up front, like if you were standing here and you took this picture, everything right down near the bottom of the page, that's called the foreground. So it's where the artist would be standing, where you would be standing if you took the picture of what's going on here. And in the middle, not close up to the front, not far away in the back, we call that the middle ground. Should make enough sense. Those names are kind of easy to remember. The depth, though, the depth that you can show in your artwork is kind of that illusion, kind of that trick, making it seem like the background's really far away, making it seem like the foreground is right up next to you. Now, we've talked about this before when we talked about landscapes. We said if something's really far away from us, we want it to look small. Well, there's one more trick that you can do to show this depth, to kind of make it look like your artwork is kind of existing in a world like we would see in our real world. And that's a pretty easy thing to do, and it's something called overlapping. So when we talk about overlapping, all that is one object being behind another object. So in the real world, I'm not Superman. I don't have X-ray vision. If something's not like clear, or at least a little clear, I can't see through it. So if I'm drawing something, if I'm drawing both of these hands, these 2 hands right here, I don't have to worry about drawing all of this hand because it's covered up. It's being overlapped by this hand. This hand is overlapping that one. Seems pretty easy, right? A lot of times, though, in our artwork, we don't think about things like that. And we try and draw each individual thing, each individual item that we want to be part of our artwork, just kind of spaced out around our page. And that kind of makes things look flat. And in the art world, flat is kind of the opposite of deep. If our artwork has a lot of depth, it's not going to look flat. It's going to give that kind of illusion, that kind of trick, that it looks like there's some distance between where we are looking at our artwork and whatever's going on in the background. So today, to kind of work with this depth idea and to kind of think about that overlapping idea, we're going to make something called a cityscape. Now, a cityscape probably sounds a lot like the word landscape, and that's because they have a lot of similarities. We said that a landscape is just a big, wide, open view of nature. A cityscape is going to be a big, wide, open view, you guessed it, of a city. You're so smart. I'm glad you figured that out. You're the best. So we're going to draw kind of some cities. We're going to make these up. Think of the things that we would see in cities. We would see big, tall buildings, right? That's kind of, when I say city, I'm thinking of New York. I'm thinking of Chicago. Like a real big real big city. We're going to use overlapping to make this kind of have that depth, make it look like, you know, our buildings kind of go off further. We're going to use some of the ideas from the landscapes. If buildings are further away from us, they'll be smaller. And we're going to kind of try and come up with a variety of like shapes to our buildings and shapes to windows and things like that to help it look a little more realistic, because we know that not all buildings look exactly the same, right? All right, my friends, that's the plan. Let's draw these cityscapes. Woo! All right, everybody, so for our cityscapes, we'll need some paper, we'll need some crayons, we'll need something to draw with. If you have a ruler and you want to make nice straight lines, this would be maybe a good time to get some ruler practice in, but we don't really need one. You can use one if you would like to, but we don't really need one. All right, so for my cityscape, we said, you know, a cityscape is going to be a nice big wide view of the city. So we're gonna kind of fill up our page with buildings. When we think about buildings, tall buildings, skyscrapers, what kind of a shape do you think of when you're thinking about those? Probably a rectangle, right? A lot of them look like rectangles. Now, in a minute, we'll talk about maybe some different things we could do to them to make some of these look different, but kind of that basic shape is a rectangle. So I'm going to start, before I worry about the depth thing, before I worry about the overlapping, I'm going to start with just some rectangles. Now, I'm not going to see the bottom of my rectangle. I want it to look like they kind of go off the page. That's going to help it look like I've filled up my page real good by the time I'm done with this. Now, I'm not going to put these like exactly side by side. I'm going to make some space between them. And I don't want all of them to be the exact same. They can be different heights. They can be different widths. I'm going to start with just a couple up there right at the front. So now, to start thinking about that depth thing and to make it look like some of these buildings have buildings behind them and then those buildings have buildings behind them, I'm going to add some more rectangles. I'm going to add the parts of the rectangles that I could see. So if there's a building behind this one, I'm not going to see the entire building maybe. I'm just going to see where it would like show up on the other side of that building. Kind of something like this. So now I'm going to go through, I'm going to add some more to this kind of next row of buildings. Same thing, we don't want them all the same exact height. We don't want them all the same exact width. We can make some differences. All right, well that's good. So we're starting to get our city going. We're starting to build some of our buildings. Now I want to talk about some ways that we could make them, you know, a little more unique, kind of a little different, so they're not all exactly the same. So on 3 of your buildings, I want you to use some different kind of a top. Now, this could be a top that I would like add after I had already put some of my building there. Maybe I'll give this one a little pointy part like that. Let's see, over here, I'm gonna go with maybe something that is just like a triangle, like that. Or instead of just adding something to the top of your building, you could just make it different as you were going. So you wouldn't have to worry about going and trying to add something on. So at least 3 of your buildings need some different kind of a top to them. You can have more different buildings if you want them, but we at least need to have the 3. So now I'm going to keep adding some more buildings. I'm going to leave some room up near the top for, you know, my sky and things like that. And as I go further back, I want them to maybe start getting just a little skinnier. They don't all have to be like really, really skinny, but since it is getting further away from us, one of the ways that we would start to see the difference in the size of these buildings would be how wide they were. So I'm going to add maybe just a few more buildings here. And all right, I think that's good. I think that's good for my main building shapes. like we said, we've got a lot of buildings overlapping other buildings. They're getting, you know, smaller, skinnier as they get further away from us. So that kind of helps make that depth thing happen. So there's one more important detail that a lot of these buildings would have, and that would be windows, right? What good is it to be in a big, giant, tall building if you can't look out at the city below you? So when we think of window shapes in houses, we usually think of things like, you know, squares and rectangles. That's fine. You can also use different shapes if you want. That's fine too. You guys are the city planners. You guys are the architects, so you can make these look however you want. Now, I don't know that I'm going to put windows on like every single building, especially not the ones that are like really far away, because if this was the real world, it would be hard to see those, right? But up close, at least, I'm going to add some windows. So I can do that a couple different ways. I can either draw individual shapes for each one of the windows, or if I wanted to, I could just do a bunch of lines going this way, and then some lines going the other way, and that'll kind of break up the building into those different kind of window shapes. Like we said, they don't just have to be things like rectangles and squares. They can be different shapes. Maybe you want yours to not have anything to do with windows at all. Maybe you want like star-shaped windows or heart-shaped windows, something that we like don't really see that often. That's fine too. All right, so I'm gonna go through, I'm gonna add a few more windows to a few more of my buildings, and I'll do that kind of quick. I'm also going to go ahead and color it, since most of this drawing is done, and once I'm done with those things, we'll talk about it for just a few more moments, and then you can get started making yours. All right, so there is my finished cityscape. As you can see, I didn't really worry too much about using realistic colors and things like that. I think this would be a much more enjoyable city to look at than one where all the buildings are like gray. That's the plan, my friends. Remember, overlapping will help show that depth. Making things smaller as they get further away from you will show that depth. A variety of rooftops and window shapes and things like that will make your picture more interesting. I can't wait to see everybody's cityscapes. Hope you guys are doing well. See you later. Bye.